Hello guys, Joker the Fool here, and this is my review of Vatican City issue number 1. Now, I was provided with a digital copy of Vatican number 1 to review as a preview copy, so I've printed out some art so I don't have the physical book in front of me like I usually do, but this is still a really cool book, and I'm going to show some of the art and give my commentary on this first issue. This is, of course, a 40-page book published by Dark Horse Comics. Is it going to be a free issue series, and it's written by Mark Millar, who's of course pretty legendary in the comic book scene. He's done a bunch of stuff for Marvel, X-Men, Marvel Ultimates, X-Men, also did Kick-Ass in the independent scene, and of course we've got Per Berg, who's also known as Narwhal, who's some of his books I've reviewed before. I've read quite a bit of his stuff, so this is something that's really right up my alley. And what Vatican City is essentially millions of vampires invade the entire planet. It's an apocalyptic situation, and the only place on Earth that the vampires can't get into is Vatican City, and under Vatican City is the Queen of the Vampires that the vampires are trying to revive. So Mark Millar gives us a really good free act structure in a very short story. So it starts with the beginning, establishing America getting taken over by the vampires, and then it will transition into a short scene in the Vatican, and then the third act is really setting up the next two issues. So you've got some art here. I'm sorry if I can't see it the best. The printer is not always at the best with the DPI. But this is just showing the Pentagon and the Capitol falling. So like I said, it starts with America basically just shuddering to the vampires instantaneously. And then you've got really the Vatican is where the next scene focuses. And of course, this is a 2-page spread. And I guess I'll comment on the art. I think this is some of the best art that Narwhal has ever done. I've said this in basically every time I've talked about Per Berg's or Narwhal's art, is that he's got this very absurdist style. He has this way of playing with the line works and drawing everything that that I would say feels very amateurish if you're not looking at it correctly, or not looking at, I guess correctly isn't the right term, but if you aren't looking at it with the intent of it building a certain tone, you'll just see something that's very amateurish. And like I've said, Narwhal knows how to draw. He just chooses to draw the way that he does. But this book, he chose a style that was much more, I wouldn't say traditional, but he's definitely going after an aesthetic that's much more common to comic book art. And I think this 2-page spread is very much indicative of that. It has a very, I'd say, much more realistic style, but there's still a lot of stylization. There's still, especially in some of the faces, you'll still see Narwhal style shine through, but he's much more subdued in making it look absurdist, and he's got a very solid structured layout and style on this. It's very different from what he typically draws, but it works perfectly for this book. So Mark Millar's writing is absolutely fantastic, and Narwhal is really using his skills to set that tone rather than inserting his own style onto it. So he's an absolutely fantastic artist, and this book is really proof to it. Like I said, I think it's some of the best work that Narwhal has ever done. Of course, he does also go out by Per Berg, and this is the start of when Rome is falling to the vampires, and they all have to fall to the Vatican. This, I believe, I forget his name, but he's going to be the Pope's guard, or he's heading to try and be part of the Swiss guard, I believe. But that all falls through because the vampires invade. And I think his character design, like I said, is definitely more in line with regular comic book art, something that if you'd read any other comic book, you would see art that looks more like that rather than the faces that Narwhal usually draws, even though that does show up a little bit in the beginning. But really what this story is focusing on is more or less the invasion of the vampire. So it's more of a horror apocalyptic comic, and I would say that doesn't necessarily work with most of the way Narwhal draws, so he's definitely taking a very different style, but there's still some stuff, like you see the way he does the onomatopoeia and say all of his lettering in general, it still feels very Narwhal, and there's still a lot, I don't say a lot, but there, like I said, there still is some of that style that he puts in all of his books that appears in here, but it's really changed and melded in a way that makes it feel very different. And I would say, I don't know, much more professional, because this is a book being published by Dark Horse, as you can see by the cover there. So this is a big boy comic, as you're supposed to say. So he does definitely take a different approach in drawing this than he would with his other independent projects that he publishes himself. And I think that's definitely the right way to go about it. And when you're producing art like this, I think this is the best art in the book. It's really, really fantastic to see, and pairing that with this fantastic script from Mark Millar, that's, like I said, a good free act structure where the first act is the start of the apocalypse in America, the second act establishes the Vatican as being important, and the third act really gets things into going for the next 2 issues to tie this up. So this, if you're watching this when I release this on Monday, April 7th, the book will be out April 9th at your local comic book shop, so be sure to go to your LCS and get this. It's going to be $5.99. Like I said, it's a 40-page floppy, so pretty typical length for a floppy book. That's 40 pages in total with the front, back matter covers included. So you're getting about 32-ish pages of story, which is, like I said, very typical for a floppy book. And this is going to be a free issue series. So I think what is here is very compelling, absolutely fantastic work from Mark Millar. And like I said, this is some of the best, if not the best, artwork that Narwhal has ever done. And he's a fantastic artist. And I think if you don't like Narwhal's other books because of the style putting you off, I think you will not have this problem, because he definitely goes about it in a different way. And I think it was a really fantastic thing for him to do that, because it's what this book needed. And as a skilled artist, Narwhal knew that, and he definitely delivered. But that's all I have for Vatican City #1. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. And thanks again to Mark Millar and Narwhal for getting me this preview copy so I could review it for you guys.